Hello everybody and welcome back to the Give a Hoot podcast, and congratulations, you got this far. It's currently week 9, meaning that finals are right around the corner. Remember to practice self-care and study hard for these last 2 weeks to finish the quarter strong. Enjoy your break once you get it, and remember that your enrollment dates have been sent out. So if you haven't enrolled in any classes yet, be sure to go to your MyUCSC portal and check out what classes they have offered for winter. Remember that there is a 19 credit limit to how many classes you can enroll in up until the first day of instruction. After that, if you have good academic standing, which is about a 3.0 or above, you can then enroll in up to 22 units. You can also waitlist for up to 10 units, so make sure you get out there and start planning your classes. Now, before we get any deeper into this episode, I would just like to remind everybody that COVID testing is available on campus by appointment. You go to your student health portal and you set up your appointment in there. It's really non-invasive, it's really easy and fast. I get tested there very often. It's available to the community even if you're not living on campus. All you have to do is be able to get to campus and you can just get tested. It's really quick. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And it doesn't go past your nostrils, which is a concern I had when I first thought about getting tested with the campus, but it's self-administered, which really makes it helpful and way less scary. Remember to be safe out there, social distance when you can. All right, as I said at the beginning of the episode, it is final seasons. Ooh, it's okay to be stressed out over finals. I know I am. So here are some tips to help mitigate that stress and make your finals week more manageable and productive. One tip is to just make a study group, because some people, like myself, just need the presence of other people to urge them to study and actually prepare for their finals. Other people might just need assistance, where the input of other people may teach them concepts that the professor might have just glossed over in class or that they just don't understand. And one of the best ways to study is actually to teach someone else. So if you teach your friends, whether they're in your class or not, about the stuff that's going to be on the final, it actually helps you study, and it's really fun to just annoy your friends with all the stuff you learned this quarter. I do it all the time, and it helps a lot. Another tip is to set a realistic goal and a time frame. For the time frame, you just set kind of what works for you and your schedule, and you be conservative with your free time, especially since we're nearing finals week. And by realistic goals, what we mean by that is to ease the burden of being easily overwhelmed with the amount of work that you have to do in such a short time. So kind of just look over everything you need to do. If you have any essays, any tests with a specific time, kind of just look over everything, including your homework and sections and labs and everything kind of closing up at the end of the quarter. Kind of just assess it and schedule out a time block to get each thing done. That way it's more manageable and it's not just a huge mess of assignments you have to do and get ready for. It's actually more just you setting time to do A at 1 to 3, B at like 4 to 6, and then make sure you also plan in breaks for eating, resting, relaxation, because I know myself, I can get really kind of just burnt out when I work all day. So setting small breaks in between, very helpful. Make sure though that your breaks don't go longer than the time you actually work. In addition to both of those tips, there's also services that exist with the campus that can help you with your classes and help you prepare for finals. One is LSS, or the Learning Support Services, which offer a variety of student studying services through MSI, which is the Modified Supplemental Instruction. And that's where continuing students help students who are taking a specific course that they did good in. For example, if someone was having some troubles with a specific concept in Chem 1A, they can either go to the professor's office hours, the TA's office hours, or an MSI instructor, which is a student that already did good in the class. Lastly, remember to practice some self-care. While on-campus self-care events may have been closed this quarter due to quarantining and social distancing, that doesn't mean that self-care isn't important. Remember that you can always step away from the computer screen and enjoy some fresh air. If that's just going on your front porch or in your backyard, that's still fresh air, that's still getting out into a different environment and kind of giving yourself a break like I mentioned earlier. You can even exercise or clean up your surrounding environment, whether that's your room, your living room, wherever it is that you're kind of studying. Having a nice, neat area can really help you to focus and feel less overwhelmed. If your surroundings are really busy and cluttered and messy, sometimes your thoughts get really cluttered and messy as well. So making sure that your space is clean can sometimes help make sure your thoughts are clean and clear and focused. Other than that, you got this. If you have any remaining questions over winter break about UCSC or Kresge or anything we talked about in this podcast, feel free to send them through our Instagram at Kresge_Parliament. I hope you had a great fall quarter this year, and we hope to see all of you return, even digitally, in winter. Have a great break, everybody. Hey there, sounds like you just finished the episode. As a little treat for listening all the way through, here's a bonus interview between Provost Ben Carson and the chair of Kresge Parliament, Anna Romstad.
Well, greetings everyone. My name is Ben and I'm the provost at Kresge College.
Great. So our first question for you is, when Kresge was still being conceived of, how did we land on our theme of power and representation?
Well, thanks for that question. As it happens, we didn't land on that theme when Kresge was first being conceived of. The theme of Kresge, when it was first developed by its founding provost, Bob Edgar, had something to do with man and his environment. Not a title that we would take nicely to these days, I don't think. The concern was, how do we live and how can we break the boundaries between living and learning and make learning a practice of life? And how does that learning reflect the world that we live in? And I know actually very little about that course. I've tried to get early versions of it. And I think, as a matter of fact, our official theme really has a lot more to do with consensus building and participatory democracy. And it's broadly had that theme since I think the 90s, when folks like Carolyn Martin Shaw and Elaine Moglen were provost. But the concept of power and representation was born under Juan Poblete and Mika Perks, who co-provosted Kresge College for about 9 years, leading up to 2014. So I think they were provost in the late aughts and the early teens.
So that's relatively recent.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What else can you tell us about the background of Kresge in terms of its founders and contributors in the process of its creation?
Well, that's a topic that I really love talking about, and it's really been a powerful one for me in terms of how it motivates my role as provost, because it's really important to me that Kresge from its very beginning has been, I think this is in one of the early course catalogs, I think even the first course catalog in 1971 says something like, Kresge is a community that wants to take leadership from its newest members. And I think it's very insightful that that was said early on in Kresge's history, because one of the biggest challenges that communities face is a sense of ownership that can be an inhibition to real consensus building. A sense that I know this place because I have lived here, it has shaped me and I have shaped it. And when newcomers arrive, there's a feeling of fear about how they might undo some of the work that you feel proud of, or undo something that you feel intimate with. And it's a common feeling. You get it at residence halls, you get it with roommate situations, you get it in all kinds of walk. Of course, the obvious metaphor is with anti-immigrant and xenophobic sentiment, racist sentiment, which is a much bigger topic than what you're asking about. But I think it was very insightful of Bob Edgar and other early faculty to say, we're going to really consciously write it into our Constitution that we take leadership from our newest members. That makes Kresge a really dynamic place. And we owe that to those earliest thinkers, Bob Edgar, and the author of a book called Ecology of Mind, Gregory Bateson, was also one of the key faculty early on in Kresge's community. And Edgar was a biologist, Bateson was a psychologist. Bateson's work as a researcher he was on the forefront of thinking interstitially and thinking contextually about how the human mind works, rather than just thinking about the brain, trying to understand it as a dynamic and relational development of the human brain. And he tried to put that into his teaching. Bateson was a biologist, but he believed very, very strongly that that we couldn't really learn biology without learning history, and vice versa. We couldn't learn the arts without learning the sciences. And their personalities played a big role. They were charismatic and excitable and exciting people to build conversations with those first students. I could go on, I could ramble on about this forever, because I also really love, actually, I'll just say one more thing. I think really the biggest, I already hinted at this, but one of the biggest sort of foundational moments for Kresge was in the provostships of Helene Moglen and Carolyn Martin Shaw, who was on the faculty long before she was provost. Carolyn Martin Shaw, a great anthropologist, African-American anthropologist, who emphasizes how to build community. That's one of the main topics that she works on as a scholar. And whenever she's emeritus now, whenever we've been able to bring her back for conversations at Kresge, it's been truly a powerful experience. She helped convert Kresge from some of its early, some of the ideals early on. I mean, all experiments have missteps. All experiments go in wrong directions, and you're not honest about your history unless you acknowledge problems. There were problems early in Kresge's history. It almost fell apart. They were so interested in living and learning together, and in the kind of intimacy that you can build with a kind of with a real participatory philosophy. They were so interested in bringing everyone together, and this was also typical of other early 1970s idealism. They became a little commune-like, and the power relations became problematic. There's nothing more problematic than having power be invisible. And I think everyone who's been through Kresge's core course knows that. And students who are watching this, if you're first-year students, you remember just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how important it is for power to be something that we reflect on and that we look straight at transparently, rather than hope that it sort of works out in the background. And I think some of those early mistakes have to do with people thinking that they had gotten rid of power. They thought that somehow they had made it so that, oh, we're all equal now, which just makes power hidden and more insidious and more toxic. And Carolyn Martin Shaw was an early faculty member, an early provost, who understood how to build. She had studied kinship in Africa, and she understood how to build communities in ways that were truly democratic. Elaine Moglen as well, we just lost her a couple of years ago, and had a wonderful remembrance of her here at Kresge. Feminist studies, literary theorist, very powerful, very, very practical administrator. And so that I don't ramble on about those early leaders, I'm going to just point you to both Carolyn Martin Shaw's and Elaine Moglen's oral history in the Oral History Project at McHenry Library. Those oral histories are really fascinating to read about Kresge's early time.
Sounds like a good recommendation. So, how has the theme of power and representation impacted your day-to-day life?
Wow, that's, I got these questions in advance, but that's the hardest one. And I can't say that it's very difficult to talk about that, because our lives have been so much turned into unpredictable vectors in these last few years. There's so much about where we're living now and how we're moving in our communities, how we're trying to think about community, that we couldn't have hoped to predict even 6 months ago. And I think that's true for everybody. But it's caused me to reflect a lot about power, and to reflect especially about my privilege. And of course, these are things that one has to reflect on a lot as a teacher, because as a teacher, whether teachers are experienced and tenured, whether they have the kind of job stability that I'm very fortunate to have, or whether you're a new teacher, you're in a position of power, and you're in a position to shape how students represent themselves in their lives and to shape how they represent themselves to each other. And that's a very distinctive kind of power. So how do we navigate that? How do we give power? How do we share power when we're in that situation? And that's always been a challenge that's been a struggle for me as a teacher. And it's something that I'm constantly working on. I'm very lucky to get to work on that as a fellow in the Center for Teaching and Learning now, led by Jody Green, a fantastic group of faculty that are talking a lot about these issues. But specifically in the last 6 or 7 months, it has really struck me that by sending our students splintering off into places far flung and reaching each other in this, creating a university environment that's really just reaching each other by Zoom, I'm really concerned that the power that we have as teachers has become harder to share, harder to deliver to others, harder to make it an opportunity for others to rise into it. And I would love to hear students speak back to me about this issue, to say what's working, to say where they feel a barrier, say where they can't quite reach their community or can't quite reach their teacher or can't quite reach me. To feel the confidence to say that is really important, and it's not maybe straightforward for everybody, but I would encourage that kind of communication, and I really would love to hear about that because I know it would help us do a better job as teachers.
Absolutely. Can you tell us how you came to be the provost of Kresge College?
Sure, yeah, and that's a really important question because this might not be well known, but I am in my last year as provost. This is the third year of my second 3-year term. It's been such a wonderful privilege, and I couldn't have imagined when I signed up for this job how much I would learn and how much fun I would have. I also couldn't have imagined how hard it would be sometimes. So when I signed up for this job, it was because, well, how I became to be provost is the same with all of the colleges. The undergraduate, the Division of Undergraduate Education, which is good. They separate them, so they're set outside. They're kind of a neutral outside observer. And when there's a need for a new provost, they make a call to the community. They let the community know that we're searching for a new provost, and they make a call to the faculty saying we're interested in faculty who might be willing to take this on. When that call came from me, it was at a time when I was looking for a little change. I had been tenured a few years prior. I had felt really myopic about my work as a musician. Normally musicians have to think about things way beyond just music. They have to think about their audiences and think about teaching how music is in society, but I had felt like I had become narrower. And to me, becoming provost, I felt would give me an opportunity to teach outside of my professional world and to do something I'm really passionate about, which is, I think students already know this about me, I'm really passionate about the liberal arts. I'm passionate about seeing education whole, seeing it as an education of a whole person whose intellectual curiosity can't be limited to just a major. And that's something that I knew I would have a chance to collaborate with great faculty and to think collaboratively about how to make that come alive for students. So I went in, I read about Kresge as much as I could. I read about its history before even the first interview. And I read about some of the challenges that I know first generation students and students from backgrounds not as well supported by the California education system, and particularly how women students have struggled to find equity in often male-dominated environments. And I read a little bit about how that's working what are teachers doing to try to solve those problems, so that I could come to an interview where I would at least have some questions. I'm not an expert on that issue, but I wanted to come and interview for this job and present my sense that those were important questions to ask and important things to collaborate on. The rest, you'll have to ask someone. You'll have to ask one of the one of the Kresge faculty or one of the alumni why they chose me. I'm very grateful that they did, but whatever I said in those interviews must have seemed like it was a good match for the college. This is a really important question, and please, I hope students will look for the opportunity to interview the new candidates for provost in the winter and spring quarters. We're not sure what the timeline will be yet. The chair of the committee is Marcia Ochoa at Oaks College, a friend of mine and a wonderful leader. So you're in good hands, but you've got to get involved. Students and staff have got to get involved in the process of selecting the new provost. That's what's going to make it a really good process.
So in this last year, what would you say your vision for Kresge College is?
When I get asked that question, I like to turn back to that first point in that course catalog about taking leadership from the newest members of the community. I think that what strikes me about Kresge is that the students have the vision, they build that vision, and they kind of don't need teachers or staff to tell them what the vision is. I mean, a lot of my vision, I've let it out in my kind of between the lines of my answers to your earlier questions. And I'm very, very eager to see things like our media and society series continue. I'm very eager to see Kresge students. One of the things that we've done in the last 5 years is Kresge has always been a place that has supported media literacy, has supported journalism, has supported thinking intelligently about the news, intelligently about how discussion and debate is managed at the level of our society. And we need that more than ever in our society. We are plagued by a total breakdown in the national and in the community and the state level. So many levels, our ability to have good political conversations is almost completely fallen apart. So having that be a lens that Kresge students look through in order to see the world, having it be one of the questions that kind of guides their intellectual lives through their degrees, I think that would be a very powerful thing. We've cultivated that media and society series, and we built that into the core course because students valued that, because students said that was one of the things that they valued most about. They valued the media elements of the core course that had been designed before I got here. So we built those stronger. We made those more intensive. And so I'm keen to see that grow stronger, and I'm really excited about that. But the only other thing I would say is, for Kresge students to feel a sense of ownership over the vision, and for you to see your next provost as somebody whose job it is to foster the conversation about the vision and to create the connections and the access to the conversation, but not really to be the one who's setting the sights on what that vision is. I hope we can keep that part of Kresge really strong.
Thank you for that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I'm super excited about the ideas Mia has been emailing me, and I know Mia has talked to Parliament about. She shared with me some ideas that Parliament had about a new version of tea and cookies, and new ways for us to have. It's so. I mentioned this a little bit already. I'm really concerned about the Zoom environment for education. One of the things about it is that we kind of start to we saw this in the spring, your education becomes just the 1 hour and 5 minutes or the 1 hour and 35 minutes that your class lasts, and then you're alone. We have to find ways to get together, even though we're tired of Zoom. We have to find ways to get together outside of class. We have to find ways to see each other, and non-hierarchically, without a teacher at the head of the at the top of the Zoom display. And so I hope we'll get creative about that. And I'm grateful that Parliament's thinking about it. So looking forward to more.
Thank you. That is all the questions we have for you today. So thank you for joining us, Ben.
Well, let me know if any more come up that you forgot. And thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And I'm looking forward to the podcast, looking forward to seeing what other people have to say too.